Hi all, welcome to the latest in my series on political ideas. So I've done already a series of videos on liberalism. This is the first of the videos on socialism, and a bit like we started off with liberalism, I'm going to explain the basic principles of it, and then we're going to move on in later videos into looking at things in more detail. This is probably of the core ideologies the most complicated one, but we'll try and go through it nice and slowly and make it as simple as we can. Right, this bit is relatively straightforward. So we're starting with this idea of human nature. Right, socialism is incredibly optimistic about human nature. They see people as naturally willing to share. They see people as generous. They see the natural state of things as being one of equality, where people think about others and others' well-being rather than just thinking about themselves. Very different to the individualistic nature that you see in liberalism. Now, the kind of key concepts in all this is things like the ideas like no man is an island, that really we don't like being by ourselves, and we've probably experiencing quite a lot of stuff along these lines with the current COVID crisis. Now, what a socialist would say is what everybody naturally wants to do is they want to work with others. They want to be with others. And that's where kind of true freedom and fulfillment comes from, is being part of a wider group or community or society, however you want to kind of phrase that last bit. So they see it as really as social animals, pack animals. We are naturally wanting to be part of a wider group, to have acceptance with others, to see others looked after, to see others succeed. And they believe that this is the natural state. And if we go back through human history, and this is people like Karl Marx wrote about this, if you go back to human history and you took it to kind of prehistoric times, then that's how you would naturally find people. They would be working together, they would be helping each other, and the idea would be that the greater good could only be achieved by that working together. Now, as the world has developed, the socialists would argue that some of that natural way of being has been lost because of systems that we live under. But they believe human nature can be changed and become more fraternal. So we become more like siblings, like brothers. We want to, where we're thinking about the others and wanting to help them than we might have been before. And therefore, this desire to cooperate can be improved amongst people through changing the conditions in which they live. And they talk very much about people being a product of the society that they come from, and that there are kind of barriers constructed in societies that stop these fraternal feelings and cooperation. Things around religion and ethnicity and class and all that kind of stuff can be broken down, and you get a real feeling of comradeship where everybody is in it together, working hard to support one another. So it's a really kind of positive view of human nature, that we're really inherently all good, generous people who want to work together and help each other. So how does it form into a society then? Well, there's a lot of stuff on society in socialism. And really, a socialist would say that the person that anybody becomes is largely determined by the society they grow up and their position in that society. Now, they say that if you grow up in an unequal society with a kind of a capitalist economic system, this will lead people to being very different from each other, and different from how they would have been if they'd grown up in a socialist state. And one of the bits that they really focus on in terms of what determines somebody's life and really sets society up is this idea of class. And they say how society is divided into these different classes. So the kind of the capitalists, the factory owners, the industrialists, the professionals, and then as you go down through the middle classes into your small shop owners and things like that, and then you end up you with the workers at the bottom, often referred to in early writings with the likes of Marx and Engels as the proletariat, and this group face great inequality, and that will shape how they develop within society. And a society which develops with large inequalities will not function properly, because that kind of comradeship, fraternity, community ideas are broken down as there are these divides between different groups. So socialists would say, if I want a kind of a perfect society, if I want a really good society, I have to have equality of outcome. Equality of opportunity to a socialist almost is in a system where you have rich and poor and higher, middle and lower and working classes doesn't really work, because there is no equality of opportunity, and you'd only get that same opportunity if you have complete equality of outcome, because otherwise the life chances of people born into the upper class are very much better than the life chances of the people born into the lower class or working classes. So they need to destroy the class system, bring about equality of outcome, and then you have true freedom and equality. And then you end up with this perfect society based on fraternity, cooperation and solidarity. So everybody is like siblings, that they are helping each other, working together, looking after each other, cooperating. So you people using different skills together to achieve the best for the whole. And solidarity, everybody's backing each other. We don't have this conflict. One of the things that socialists talk about in a capitalist society is that because you've got different classes and different groups, then those groups tend to clash. And capitalism itself perpetuates this idea of competition. And what you want is, you don't want competition, you want people working together, according to socialism. Right. Now, the socialists see the economy as the absolute key. Now, in early kind of communist writing or socialist writing, there's this idea of economic determinism, which is that the whole of society and how it functions is determined by the economic system. So if you change the economic system, you change everything else. And that will go down to how a socialist will explain how different people will behave. And they'll talk about the natural state that they will see society, and people go, well, society's not like that. People are out for themselves, da 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 da. And they go, yeah, but that's because they live in the capitalist system. It stops them doing what they would naturally do if they'd grown up in a society that was better. So to make sure that the economy runs as socialists would like, then they believe that the state plays a central role, and it should plan the economy. It dictates what happens, and it controls the markets and what is being produced, and prices and wages and all those kind of things. Now, the fundamental parts of this, some of this is common ownership. So you'd have state own and run industry. You'd have extensive, in a socialist state, extensive public services. Things like we have in the UK, like the NHS, but even grander scale, going into more and more different things. They would ideally see either, and this is where the socialists vary, they would either see the complete removal of capitalism. So if you go to kind of the really revolutionary fundamentalist socialist ideas, then you'd have no capitalism at all. In the more moderate evolutionary forms of socialism, then what you would see is a degree of regulation or moderation of capitalism. So it's not left to run kind of in a laissez-faire kind of way, that it has a degree of control over it by the state. The state will also redistribute wealth, often referred to as basically the Robin Hood principle, where you take money from those who have lots of it and you give it to those who don't have very much. And this can be through highly progressive tax systems or things like that. Very generous benefit systems as well. And this makes sure that you have this more equality of outcome. And this is really important in a socialist economy. And the socialists argue, well, this will do is it'll create a stable economy that meets the needs of everybody, rather than the few, and all the workers will strive for the common good. Right, so how about the state? Well, according to most socialist thinking, the state needs to be really, really strong. It needs to run the economy. Now, it talks about power to the people, power to the workers, and this idea that power is shared amongst everybody. Now, there is, and I imagine that there's lots of people shouting at the video right now, going, but if I look at what I believe to have been socialist states in the past, there was no power for the people. It was concentrated in the hands of leaders or dictators, people like Stalin or Mao. Now, it's not done necessarily always in socialist state, but the principle is there, is essentially a democratic one, that power should lay in the hands of the people, and in what form that's done can vary. Now, socialists do disagree about the exact nature of the state and what it should do, but they do say it needs to control inequality. Now, again, we get different socialists on different ends of the scale. Some would want a huge amount of state intervention and some would want less. So that is a movable feast, and it's quite a difficult one to ponder on that, exactly the nature of a social state. The bit makes it even trickier if we go to the real extreme end of socialism, and its originator, its father, Karl Marx. Well, he talks about eventually the state will fade away. So you will have a period of a really strong state dictating everything that's going on. And it says eventually, when human nature changes and everybody accepts the idea of cooperation, fraternity, and the other key principles, what will happen is you won't need the state telling people to do it. They'll just do it. And therefore, eventually, you'll get this kind of utopia and the state will fade away. So it's really interesting aspect of socialism, with the state going from being essentially all-powerful and all-encompassing to eventually fading away altogether. Right, socialism is a highly kind of divided ideology. Is kind of got lots of groups and subgroups. Fundamentally, you've got the really kind of revolutionary or fundamentalist side of socialism, which is saying, right, we need to completely destroy capitalism, get rid of it. And you've got Marxism, Marxist-Leninism, and democratic socialism and things in there who are going, right, we need huge state, we need lots of control, we need to fundamentally get rid of capitalism. Then we have a kind of revisionist socialism, also known as evolutionary socialism. And that includes things like social democracy, or in its most watered down form, the third way. And so we can go, in terms of the different types of socialism, we can all go all the way from Marx and Lenin through all the way down to Tony Blair. And all of them would, to a degree, would claim to be socialists. So in that way, it's quite a divided ideology, and therefore quite difficult to pin down exactly what is meant by it. And different socialists would have different ideas on the state and the economy and society and all the different aspects we've talked about. In future videos, I'm going to go into the key themes in more detail. I'm going to look at the different types of socialism in more detail, and I'm going to examine key thinkers in more detail as well. So stay tuned to the channel, and there will be more to come on this, just as there is on there already on Lib. Right, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like, to subscribe, to comment. There'll be polls and things that appear with the little eye in the top right hand part of the screen, so do those as well. Click on, watch more of these videos. Really good to have you watching, and I'll speak to you all again soon.